Hello, my name is Kat Fowler. Today I'll be summarizing Chapter 12 of Coercion and its Fallout by Murray Sidman, and Chapter 12 is titled Coercion and the Conscience. So in this chapter, Sidman explains in life we're presented with two options. Either you can take control and take whatever you want with whatever cost necessary. This would be examples of this would be using bribes, lying, cheating, or you can live a life by the book. For example, these individuals will stop completely at every red light, even when no one is around. They follow every single rule to the T. The rule breakers take risks that may result in punishment if he or she is caught. However, if no one finds out, they can avoid punishment and reap the benefits. So, a non-rule breaker does not risk the punishment. They do not give into temptations. For example, say your mom made a fresh batch of delicious cookies, but warned you not to eat any. When your mom left the room, you decided to take a cookie. You risk being caught and punished, but without being caught, risk the opportunity for the positive reinforcement of the cookie. So if you chose to follow your mother's request and not take the cookie, you chose to follow the rules and not give in to temptation, most likely due to the punishment, or the idea of punishment. Sidman argues that many times we feel internal conflict pulling us in either direction of right or wrong. He also states that it takes time to get to a place where we reject all temptation, and that many of us never actually get there. So what is conscience? On page 438, Sidman defines the conscience as a shorthand way of referring to our tendency to do the right thing when conflicting contingencies pull us in opposite directions, particularly when at least one of these contingencies might involve punishment. So for me, when I think of this, I think of the Bart Simpson example with there might be like your angel version of yourself and your devil version of yourself on either shoulder, kind of leading you astray or leading you towards the more moral choice, so to speak. So Sidman also claims that we're not born with conscience. He used children as a means of explaining it. When babies are born, they do not know right from wrong. They are egotistical or egocentric, crying for needs, wants, and desires. As they grow and develop into curious children, they begin to explore their environment. If a child reaches towards danger, like an electrical socket or outlet, a parent may sternly say no. At first, this may be enough to keep the child away, but the child will keep returning out of temptation and curiosity. A mother or parent may have to repeat the no warning or stern warning toward the child until maybe the child, if the child's old enough, will start repeating it like, oh, no, no, until it becomes internalized. Eventually, the child will stop returning to the outlet and begin to find fascination or curiosity elsewhere. So the origins of consciousness. Sidman argues that conscience is rooted in coercive control. We learn what bad means from experiencing threats or actual punishment. After receiving the punishment, we no longer engage in that bad behavior, or we avoid it. Freud thought conscience, or as he called it, superego, was a way for society to impose morality on us. He thought we created internal things like conscience to help explain those bad or selfish impulses. Freud's theory also acknowledged the social aspect of how we identify right and wrong. Thinking back to the baby example from before, the mother provided social contingencies of saying no when the baby approached the outlet. Initially, this served as the warning sign until the baby internalized it. These warning signs can be saved in the conscience and can bring avoidance to those bad things. The downside to the non-rule breakers. Building conscience through punishment often presents undesired byproducts. For example, those who never break the rules, those who never break the rules or follow the law with extreme precision may also find creativity dangerous or uniqueness disturbing. These things often challenge the rules, therefore it may elicit punishment. These characteristics make it challenging for those non-rule breakers to adapt. We may also face internal conflict with temptation, wanting to do something but feeling bad about wanting to do it, and maybe even losing trust in ourselves. Sidman states that effective therapy will have to deal not with the inner forces, but the real-world contingencies, with relations between conduct and conscience. Those contingencies generate both our adaptive behavior and our problem behavior. Therapy must come to grips with the causes, not just the results. So, can you trust your conscience? Society depends on conscience. However, we also have those individuals that are our exceptions, the extreme rule breakers, such as murderers, thieves, and psychopaths, may have a defective conscience, so to speak. In other words, they do what pleases them at the expense of others. Another example would be large corporations who employ teams of lawyers to exploit and manipulate the law for personal gain and profit. The society double standard brings us back to the first slide. The rule breakers versus the non-rule breakers. Temptation and punishment guide us in one direction or the other. So much of this chapter focused on the societal punishment for doing the wrong thing, claiming a life mostly driven by a threat-based conscience is oppressive. The book gave an example referencing the negatively phrased 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not insert 10 Commandments here. At the end of the chapter, Sidman poses the question, what if we positively reinforced for doing the right thing instead of punishing for doing the wrong thing? So something that I see a lot, especially in a school setting, would be the positive behavior support plans. I feel like a lot of those, especially on a school-wide basis, when implemented correctly, can help almost like catch the students being good instead of punishing them and giving them detentions or giving them those negative reinforcements or punishments, so to speak, when they do the wrong thing. Instead, it encourages them to keep doing the right thing. So that's one example when I've seen it. So overall, my discussion question for you is, what temptations do you give into or do you resist in your life? So for me, my biggest temptation is junk food and chicken wings. So I know in moderation they aren't necessarily bad for you, but I often give into them on a frequent basis, so that moderation thing kind of goes out the window. And I notice that I definitely give into these temptations a lot more, like when I have a bad day, for example. And on those bad days, it doesn't matter what anyone says or does. I don't really care. I just want to eat my unhealthy food and live my best life. So that's all I've got for you. I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks. And here are my sources. Thanks, guys.